which is wonderful.
Yeah.
But of course, in a sense, we are exactly the problem that we're talking about, right?
Right.
We are part of it. So we're intrinsically linked into this thing. And I know you talk a lot about, and I really resonate with your stuff, Tone, about how you talk about the gurus inside you, the coaches inside you, right? And maybe leading into how do you discern information? And Tone has he's developed a very highly intuitive capacity to find out what's right with him. And you learned this from, what, the Holy Shift? And
Yeah, well, the Holy Shift is just more or less like the answer is already within you. You are the answer. So that's the paradigm shift, because we were taught or conditioned to think that the answer was outside of us. So we have to go searching for the answer, but there's all this conflicting like stimuli, everything coming from different directions, and it's like, well, what's the answer? What's the truth? And the holy shift happened when all of a sudden, when you surrender to all that stuff that's out there and you turn the focus back to within you, you have this like moment of clarity where you realize that the answer was already here to begin with, you know, and so it was revealing, and that's pretty much summarized. Well, how do you know the difference, right? And how you're able to filter that information? Well, it's more or less, you know, you go through the process, you're reading stuff, and when you learn something, it's more like an awakening, like, oh yeah, I knew that, you know, like, but how did you know that? It was just more or less like a guru, a true guru, or a true teacher guides you to that place that's within, that helps reveal that answer that you sort of like knew all along, but you just needed some kind of verification or confirmation in what you're learning. So in the example of like reading something, when you really get it, it becomes like a holy shift. Like you realize like, wait a minute, I knew this all along. It's so obvious. And so when you're moving through the world and you're looking for like information, it's not so much like information, but when it becomes knowledge, then you truly like own it. It is you. You know, there's a ton of information everywhere, but the knowledge is when you realize that you like know it, but you don't say like I know this, because then all of a sudden you really don't. You know, most of the humble teachers and geniuses, they never like give credit to themselves for that answer. They sort of give credit to something that's beyond themselves, and you know, they're grateful for this gift. They're grateful for the answers that were revealed to them, and more or less, it's really simple. It all comes down to simplicity. You know, you realize that all I need to do is just take a moment, take a deep breath, maybe even meditate, and then you get to this space of like stillness and clarity, and then all of a sudden, like as you're like maneuvering through the world, things start to become obvious. So if you're using like Twitter, you imagine like the ticker tape of the stock market, right? It's just flying with numbers. Same thing that's happening in the world. There's all this stimulation that's coming around. But when you're still, you start to recognize things immediately. It's like walking down the street and there's people walking, everybody's busy, but then all of a sudden you just pick out a face out of that crowd and you just recognize each other. Like, you don't have to say anything. It's totally nonverbal. And you just know that's the direction I need to flow to. That's going with the flow, and just being aware of your environment, being aware of what's going on with you. And when all the mind chatter is like subsiding, that's when you get the moment of clarity, because it does. It comes down to science and brain waves. They study left and right brain, and they notice that people that are very creative, like that rational side of sort of analyzing and paralysis, sort of keeps people frozen. But if you can sort of let that just subside on its own, whatever technique you use, eventually the right brain starts kicking in, the neurons start feeding into the field, and then you all of a sudden start getting these answers that are revealed.
So, I kind of get what you're saying. What I guess the thing we want to communicate to, say, someone who's coming at this and looking at, okay, I'm stuck in some form of paralysis analysis. I'm looking for answers to a particular question. I seem to be running around in circles in my mind, or deciding or debating, or how do I get past this one? What is the right choice? It doesn't matter if it's health, if it's wealth. We're bombarded with these variety of choices. How do you get to that place? So if you could trace back, now this wasn't something that was natural to you, correct?
Well, yeah, that was what's funny, because it always had been natural as a child, and then that's where the conditioning and the belief systems came in, and the institutionalism, you know, all the different things that I started to give into society. But then when I had my rock bottom moment where, you know, I was stuck. I didn't know what to do. I was stuck in the middle of the South Pacific on a tiny island. Didn't have much money. You know, almost homeless, and I didn't know what else to do other than like surrender to, you know, whatever you want to call it. And you know, I broke down, and then all of a sudden there was this stillness. There was like the mind just stopped for that moment, and then I realized that I was okay. That there was nothing outside of me that would ever make me feel fulfilled. And from then on, I recognized that all I needed to do, if I was ever confused or felt stagnated or stuck, I just had to just take a time out, find a place that was quiet, and just go within and just wait. And then all of a sudden the answer would just reveal itself right then and there. And then it became a practice where I could do this not only when I was in a quiet place, but when I was in a world of all this crazy distraction. But I had this sort of like island of peace that I was hanging out in. And then I could just tap into it, have my eyes open and be aware of everything that's happening, but it would still be stillness in me. And then I would get an answer, or I would pay attention to, okay, where is everything flowing to, you know, and then head that direction. And without fail, like, I'm still here to this day. I had incredible, miraculous things happen that cannot be explained. And so that's pretty much the simplicity of just going within and then waiting for that answer to reveal.
So, now, would you say leading up into that point, okay, so there's, let's say, Tone's life before the shift. Let's call it the shift. I know you like to refer to this as the holy shift. Your life's, you kind of divided up into three categories here, if I correctly got it. You had your childlike awareness that operated in this, you know, flow zone, if you will. And then you went through a period of stacking all sorts of beliefs and institutionalizations and memes, themes, and schemes, as I like to call it, on top of each other until you were getting some form of analysis paralysis, right? Like you were jammed up. And you were trying to work these programs of information, right? And you're getting that kind of stuff, like, you know, the alarms going off and the trucks going by and the sirens going by and you know, weapons of mass distraction, right, that are out there today to take you out of yourself. So you experience this, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what we're trying to say is Tone's experienced the exact thing that you experience when you go on the internet and see all these comic things, or you look in your TV and you have 250 channels and you see something on channel 35 that you want, but maybe there's something better, and you clicked it and there's something on 82 that's really good. And then you keep, well, that was good. Oh, I should go back to 35, but oh, it's almost 8:30. We got to check out what's on 115, and you get to 115, and then after you go, oh my God, I want to go back. You go back to 35. That show's over. But then you realize that at 250, you know what I mean? Like that. That's where we're at. The question is, do you feel that going through that experience of confusion, going through the point where the